All right, well, welcome back to the course on the Nakshatras. Here again with Michael Reed of AuthenticAstrology.com. And we're going to begin our exploration of the Nakshatras today with Uttara Ashadha. So, Michael, what do you have to share with us today?
Well, I thought I'd start in terms of Uttara Ashadha with the gunas that are connected with it, because they really give an understanding, as we've been following through these nakshatras, of the spiritual process, where we're at with the particular spiritual process. And if you'll remember with Purva Ashadha, well, it was peeling away at layers of the ego so that one could understand one's true spiritual nature. Now, what particularly begins to happen at this point is we recognize these last 9 nakshatras are all sattvic at their foundation. But information as to one's spiritual nature now must be assimilated. And as a part of this process, one begins to create a different life. That's the Rajasic, because basically Uttara Ashadha is sattvic at its basis. Then it builds upon that with Rajasic energy. And then the final outcome is sattvic again. So one begins to create a different life based upon one's new understanding. And through the establishment of this new life, a chiseling process begins to take place. And what I mean by that is one begins to face challenges, which then takes one to ever deeper and deeper levels of understanding the true nature of reality and the true nature of oneself. And Uttara Ashadha is associated with the Vishvadevas. And the Vishvadevas are the gods of universalization. So what do I mean by universalization? I mean getting a wider perspective of the truth, understanding to a deeper level what underlies all of creation, and what underlies oneself as well. And what the Vishvadevas do is they give the forces that are necessary to expand our awareness, right? Such as one of them is called Driti, and with Driti it's about being firm in one's resolve. So these are all forces that are associated with expanding our awareness. Another, I believe, is Vasu. Right, so with Vasu, it's about having the light of awareness with which to expand one's awareness. So it's with Uttara Ashadha that this process begins to take place. Uttara Ashadha is also symbolized by the planks of a bed. Now I'm going to explain what I mean by that. You know, like if you, in modern days, we'll look at a mattress and we'll see those little wooden boards that are underneath the mattress that create the support for the mattress. Well, this particular symbolism is symbolic of creating the foundation for our final resting, or for our liberation, so that we're free to reside in, pure consciousness. Mm-hmm. It's through Uttara Ashadha that this begins to be founded. Another analogy that's connected with this particular aspect of it, if you look at the planks that are underneath the bed, well, they're the lowest part of a bed. So there we have the concept of humility, right? When we go through suffering, it is through suffering that humility is developed, right? It's through facing challenges that we begin to integrate a higher level of humility. We become more humble. It's also through that process, pardon me, that we develop empathy. It's through having, to the extent that an individual has suffered, that's the extent to which their empathy begins to expand, which isn't to say that there are people who haven't experienced a high level of suffering who don't have any empathy, right? It's just saying that the more suffering one experiences, the more of this chiseling process that one goes through, the more empathy one develops, because one begins to see that there's a very deep connection between self and other. Mm-hmm. On one level, there's no difference. So one is able to tune in more deeply to that, right? Another thing that begins to happen in terms of Uttara Ashadha is we recognize that ultimately there's nothing to lose. There's nothing in life that we can lose. The most important thing is dignity. dignity can't be lost. The dignity of oneself resides in one's connection with the soul. Now, we may feel bad about ourselves. That's in the emotions. That's in the mind, right? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, that experience can lead to a deeper level of humility, feeling that loss, right? But the one thing that can never be lost is one's dignity or one's true nature. And it's Uttara Ashadha that helps one to recognize this. And actually, the Shakti that's connected with Uttara Ashadha is the power to grant an unchallengeable victory. Okay, so the individual goes through this experience of having a hint of their own true nature. Then they want to start a different life. And through the establishment of that different life, they recognize that there's more spiritual growth that they still have to go through. And through going through that growth process, they're shown ever deepening layers of the true nature of existence and ever deepening natures of their own true nature. Mm-hmm. And it's through that they recognize that, sure, well, there's not really anything that I can lose. And so then they begin to have more confidence in their own strength. And this can take place on any particular level. But I should mention that with Uttara Ashadha, it's a moksha-driven nakshatra, right? So a person can have a specific goal in mind, but that goal is going to be associated with having some type of freedom from something. A good example would be Martin Luther King. I believe his natal sun was in Uttara Ashadha. Okay, so he went through his own journey. He said that one of his greatest experiences was when he was in a jail in Birmingham. So he was taken into a really difficult situation, but he had time to, I think he read a lot of Gandhi when he was there, and he had a lot of awakening experiences when he was in that particular situation. Right. Which gave him greater strength. And there you have it in a nutshell. That's pretty much what Uttara Ashadha is all about. The basis above is the heavens granting one the strength to win. Mm-hmm. Down here on Earth in our physical incarnation, well, we have a goal. We have a goal that we want to achieve, right? That goal is related to some sort of liberation, some sort of being freed from a particular set of circumstances. With the civil rights movement, obviously it was about greater level of rights. So wanted to be free from oppression, okay? The result of those two is becoming the unchallenged victor. Now, Purva Ashadha before Uttara Ashadha is the former victory. Uttara Ashadha is the latter victory. And it's really interesting because things that tend to take place under Uttara Ashadha tend to come to fruit later on. It doesn't yield immediate results. It's somewhere down the line that there's a breakthrough. Right. Because one has to go through the challenge first. The ruling planet here is the sun. And the Trimurti association is with Shiva. So there's the peeling away still at layers of the ego, getting to the root of things, facing the challenges. But through facing those challenges, one is granted a higher level of strength, a higher level of awareness, a different perspective, and a greater level of confidence. Right. Yeah.
When you were talking about Martin Luther King, what was the planet that you referred to in this nakshatra?
I think it was his natal sun. I could be wrong on that.
You're right. I was just curious. I was trying to play it out in my head. And I've seen that chart recently. And I was trying to think which one was it, and I wasn't sure if it was the moon or the sun. So yeah.
I always like using him as an example of Uttara Ashadha, because if you look at the civil rights movement, well, the work that he did for the civil rights movement, it attained some results while he was still alive, but the big results that came were after his death, later on. Something happened later on with what he did at a particular time.
Right. So that's probably, maybe that's either in his 10th house or near his 10th cusp. That seems like that would be, hold on, I want to pull it up here now that we're talking about it.
Okay.
Okay, so the sun is at 2506, and then we've got the 10th cusp at 1843. So it's close to that. So that's interesting. And also,
that was his duty, his
Yeah.
responsibility, his dharma. Yes.
He's got that Rahu in the first house, so speaks to the challenging the culture, right? I mean, I just bring that up because, I think he's probably a good example of how Rahu worked in such a way that, it was challenging the culture, and that's what Rahu needs to do sometimes,
Exactly.
So his sun was in Uttara Ashadha, and the ruling planet of Uttara Ashadha is the sun. So
Right.
the sun does pretty well there, I would imagine.
It does, and that is something that we will discuss later on when we get more into the techniques. Is a planet does function very strongly within its own nakshatra.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry to sidetrack you there.
That's okay.
I was thinking about his chart recently, and I kind of wanted to clarify some of those points.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So where did I interrupt you at?
I think I had pretty much covered everything with Uttara Ashadha.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So when we think about, this nakshatra and, we think about the sun, what would happen if, say, we had, let's consider maybe Venus in this nakshatra or Saturn in this nakshatra. How might that how might that play out in a person's chart? Just those planets by their very nature, not necessarily considering house lords and whatnot.
Well, two things that came to mind immediately, right? Let's talk about Venus in Uttara Ashadha. Well, one might have, dependent upon one's natal moon, what nakshatra that's placed in, one might have greater luck with relationships later on in life, rather than earlier on. And when you mentioned Saturn, the first thing that popped to my mind, Saturnian processes are very long as well. So whatever Saturn is associated with in that particular chart, I would probably be looking for that to begin to bear its fruit later on in life. Yeah.
I see.
That's good. Because Saturn is very slow. It's going to take its time.
Right.
And it would also mean that the individual would likely experience more, I'm trying to think of the right way to put it, more challenges.
Mm-hmm.
The experience of having to go through the transformation would become more intensified because Saturn would naturally create that obstruction.
Right.
But we'd also have to look at the fact that Saturn is going to be in his own sign, in Uttara Ashadha.
Right. Yeah, okay, well, good. I know we'll get more into that as we get into the technique portion of things, but I just like to get those ideas going because I know, when I've taken classes or I listen to other people, their reflections on classes that, even though we're learning the information, which is the foundation, the blocks we need, it does help to kind of think a little bit every now and then, about
exactly.
These, so.
But, touching on one more thing with Saturn, the person would be very determined in whatever it was that they were trying to achieve through Saturn. They wouldn't mind waiting.
Right.
They would be fine with, letting the process take its time and go slowly. They'd be very practical in that process, step by step.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. And even with the idea of suffering, it's they're fine with that, right? Because they can bear it, they can see the end result and they're able to kind of, hunker down and make its way through. So that makes sense. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next nakshatra then.
Yeah.
Shravana.